And today we're going to talk about 8 habits that men can do where you leave women fantasizing about you. Thank you so much for joining us again on Second Act TV. So happy to welcome back Joni Caldwell Lerner, the author of Stop, Look, Choose, Your Journey to Peace and Freedom. Joni, thank you so much for being here again.
It is my pleasure. You know how much I love you and your viewers.
By the way, before we get going, I want everybody to know we now have a great way to help support our channel. That is at the website, secondact.tv. We now have merchandise. And by the way, Joni, I'm sending this bottle to you. It's really high. Happens to be the water bottle. There's visors, there's t-shirts, there's purses. So check it out. And every time you purchase something, it does support the channel directly. So anyway, today we're going to talk about 8 habits that men can do where you leave women fantasizing about you. I read this and I thought, okay, this is great for Joni. What do you think?
Well, I actually am very happy about the topic. In the research, at first, I'm like, oh, ooh. And then I realized that all of them it's about being present. It's their presence as opposed to their performance. There might be something here for you. Not all 8, for sure. This is just, some of them won't fit into personalities, etc. But wouldn't you like to be fantasized about?
Well, let's get right to the first one. The whisper that cuts through noise, otherwise known as the selective attention trigger.
Well, okay, so there's a little caveat here because we're talking about people over 50. A whisper, you're like, huh? What? So that was my first thought. But the truth is, there's a certain volume we're speaking. If I lean in and go, and you know what, Silka? Suddenly your senses go, whew, something important's coming, right? So if you're in a setting where it's not a cacophony of noise at a restaurant and it's reverberating and all that, and this is a possibility, you could just lean in and go, you know what my favorite thing is in life? It's just going to lean in and go, whoa, it's like this secret intimate thing is coming. I love hiking, or I love sunsets, or whatever it is. Be authentic and spontaneous, and this will work. If you're not, they'll come off as manipulations or machinations.
There's something about a whisper that gets someone's attention, and then because I was thinking about this too, this is so silly. It's not you remember a whisper more than somebody that just talks out loud. So I think this is a really good point.
Well, think about one last thing on this. If you watch all the best TED Talks in the world, they're not yelling at you at the same volume the entire time. And if you go back through our segments, even, we do the same thing on occasion. It's just catching the attention of the brain.
See, I didn't even know that. We have selective attention. Love it. Here's the next one. The unfinished sentence that haunts her mind, otherwise known as the Zeigarnik effect.
Right.
What is that?
Well, let's break that down. What it is an open loop. And we use it in leadership. I use it when I present. In fact, I presented in, I think it was March, to a group of 26 leaders. And at the very beginning, I said, we're going to do, look at this, and this. And I'm going to share something very personal with you. And then I dropped it. And about 3/4 through the 3-hour or 4-hour presentation, the guy goes, what were you going to share with us? And I said, not yet. So it keeps their attention. So it leaves an open ending, and that brain needs conclusion.
Well, what I thought was interesting about this one, again, the intent here, to give men some tips of what can be said so women will think about them. But it's the unfinished moments that they stick in our minds more than, something that was completed. And then how do you actually do that? Is it logical, as they write here, that you casually walk away in the middle of it? I mean, I don't see how that is actually done. It seems difficult
you and I
to
agree
do.
on that one. There are a couple of things that we can talk about. One of them, let's say in the beginning of the conversation, he says, I want to remember to tell you the story of when I went to Scotland. But I was golfing the other day, blah, 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 blah. So that's an open loop. Sometimes, and you probably experience this, you'll say something like, I love art museums. And he'll go, oh, that's something we should do together. That's an open loop because he hasn't asked her on the date, but it's a seed that's been planted where she's like, well, when's he going to ask me to the museum?
Yeah, so it's not like you're in the middle of a sentence, you just walk away.
I might not be appreciative of that. I guess you could, if you were really charismatic, you could pull that off.
Well, anyway, you can look that up. Apparently, the Zeigarnik effect is something that's very common. Based when after I was reading it, and it's just super interesting, and I love all the
Yeah.
psychological stuff.
It's actually a very clever and interesting psychological tool.
So now number 3, the
Mhm.
glance at her lips, then back to her eyes, making her wonder if you might kiss her.
Yeah.
It sounds a little juvenile, but
Okay,
thinking
but
about that, when somebody looks at your lips, yeah, that's kind of sexy.
so if I'm talking to you and I look at your lips and I look back up, your brain goes, ooh, because now, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, the way you said it was fun and funny, ooh, glance at your eyes and your whatever. But there is an intensity. First of all, just actually look in her eyes. Some people are not comfortable with that, especially if they're auditory people. It's
Mhm.
interesting, neuro-linguistic programming, right? They're not as comfortable with eye contact. But
Mhm.
yes, looking in the eyes, looking at the lips, looking at the eyes again, that can be very pr gently provocative,
Mhm.
right? It needs to be subtle.
Mhm.
And then the subtlety creates a little bit of a tension there.
They say here that according to studies that attraction increases when people unconsciously focus on each other's mouths. And I guess the premise here is also you have to kind of like the person. This is not going up to a stranger and doing this.
We're talking about being on dates.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's a third or fourth date or something, but with confidence and warmth. Again, not all of these are going to apply to every person.
This is something that I can totally see how to implement this. So if you're listening here and you are at that stage, developing a relationship with someone, try it. I love to hear if it worked or not. And I do, you're right. I say it in a funny way because it does kind of strike me funny. But these are serious. These are supposed to actually work.
Right? How are we showing up? And these are just little ways of maybe connecting a little more deeply.
So here, this is good too. The fleeting touch and the silence that follows, otherwise known as intermittent reinforcement.
Yeah, think slot machines, okay? It gets people addicted. So if you think about it, and you want to make sure that maybe she's already leaned in, or maybe she's touched your arm or something like that. You don't, again, we've talked about this, you don't want to be aggressive or invasive, but it stops my brain a little bit. It's like, ooh, the pull away part. So you're not leaning in like glomming onto her, you're just like, and then so anyway. And then the brain's going, oh, I hope it comes back.
Well, it says you pull away as if it meant nothing. It's that kind of aloof. I mean, that's a little acting, I think, there.
One of the things that they talk about in here is not being needy in energy, right? None of this is done in a needy way or a
Mhm.
manipulation or anything
Mhm.
like that. It's just if it's spontaneous, it
Yeah.
feels right. And I'm a kinesthetic person. So our senses are very important and touching is very important.
Mhm.
So I do that. I know I will touch a person's arm or something like that. Sometimes I'm like, oh, HR. So just make sure it's the right setting and everything.
Well, and really, when I was reading this too, and when I thought about it, I remember, in romantic settings, or what cued when I read this, that if somebody, touched, and then you do wonder will he touch me again?
Mhm, mhm.
I
Want
mean,
to look
again,
out
it
again.
sounds so juvenile and so little girly, but we are wearing pink today, so I guess that's appropriate. But they, but it is. This is something that could work. So if you already have that little rapport, yeah, again, try it. Try it.
Yeah, and fantasizing is a strong word, but
Mhm.
if it gets her to think about it, or
Right.
think about you, or gosh, thinking about dinner the other night with Joe, and he
Mhm.
touched my arm, and I just like it was like, ooh,
Yeah,
you
you know
know?
what? I think I've actually said something like but way a long time ago. It's a great point. This is fun too. The smile that says, I know something you don't.
So like a mischievous sort of playfulness, it creates a curiosity, that smile. I'm being mischievous right now. Did you catch that?
I can see that. Again, if it comes natural, this is a very charming thing to do.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about negativity and moving away from that. And so a mischievous smile is a very positive,
Mhm.
engaging, higher energy kind of thing.
Yeah, they call it, I think, your cognitive curiosity, and it activates the same reward system in her brain as solving a mystery or treasure hunts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, think about that. If he's got a little smile, you're like, what?
You need to find out
That's
what
very
that
good.
is. Yeah, exactly. Well, here you mentioned this earlier, the lean in and unexpected whisper, anticipation psychology. But we kind of talked about that. How does that differ from what we said before? The move closer, pause, and say something playful. Or
It's about the contrast. I think that's what they're going for. So the whisper itself is what we talked about
oh,
in the beginning. The leaning in and saying something playful is the contrast. So you're coming in and she's like, "Oh boy, what's going on?" And it's like, "I love donuts." And then you come back again. But there's a contrast. And so again, it's about engaging her brain, engaging the psychological interest and curiosity of a person.
as a matter of fact, they say that to you. She expects intimacy, but instead gets surprise and charm. That contrast, God, see, you're right on board. Of course you are. Releases desire. It does. Yeah. Again, another good one to test because it's easy to implement and be sincere about it, be authentic about it. Okay, number 7 here. The look that undresses, then laughs it off, or known as safe danger.
Yeah, interesting, right? Listen, know the room, know your audience before you do. So I've shared this with you before. When I came out of a very long marriage through the divorce, it was a year before I started dating, and I did not know if I was attractive. I did
Mhm,
not know if anyone would want to date me. I didn't, my confidence was not very high. I mean, I had
mhm,
to work at that. So if you're feeling that way out there, you can really do this.
mhm,
Okay. That's really important. But if a man shows interest that you are attractive in that, I
mhm,
mean, I went, oh, maybe I am kind of cute. Just so for me, my reaction was because it wasn't leering or it wasn't
mhm.
disrespectful. But my reaction was, he finds me attractive. And it empowers me to be now. I'm at a point now in my life where I just know who I am. And so I don't need that outside validation. But it's still nice when John says, "Well, you're so pretty,"
Mm.
out of the blue. He wouldn't, if I needed him to say that, he wouldn't say it.
Yeah, they
But
say here the edge between predator and protector. You
safe
have to
danger
already
is
know the person a little bit.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and forgive us if we've triggered anyone out there because there are all kinds of situations in the world.
Mhm.
So
You're absolutely right. And we again re-emphasize that on these. I think all of them apply to having already met this person. You don't do this and in a room with the first time you meet them. This is
well, if you've been on the date for 2 hours, you might. It depends on which
yes. Yeah.
you can connect heavily in a 2 hour period.
Here's finally number 8, the goodbye that comes first, that most men linger, be the first one to like cut the meeting or cut the date short without being rude. Is that what they mean?
Yeah, I think so. And what they're saying is it creates scarcity. It leaves the person wanting more.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes if a guy finds somebody and they're like, whoa, this person's really wonderful and amazing, they want to you know, lock her down. Don't do that in the first date or
Mm-hmm.
the second or third or whatever, but just, wow, I've really had a great time. It's time to go. I gotta go.
Yeah, something that again that's not rude, but it's so true. that if you're the whoever's the first to leave is the more desirable. I think
Yeah.
that applies to both. A matter of fact, I'm wondering how much of this really does apply both ways as well. I think some of them might be a little creepy for women to do versus men, but I think all of them have say something about just body language or
Yeah.
silent, communication that we may not give enough value to. What are your final thoughts on this? On this,
Well, I think
Joni?
it's sometimes, and I may be wrong, but I think it's relationships come more easily to women in some ways. Communicating, women use 5,000 words, men use 1,500, something like that. I mean, it just comes a little more easily to them. So this is really just to spark some thought out there, to
Mhm.
to give a little oomph and confidence in them going out there. And I got to tell you guys, if you're out there dating over 50, I think you're a warrior. I think that you are amazing and that I am so happy for you that you haven't just laid down. And it's fine if some people are, I'm just done. I'm
Mhm.
done. I've got my friends. I've got my golf or whatever it is. That's fine too. But you warriors out there on the front line, we love you. We support you. We want you to win. And you can do this. But
Mhm.
enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. Enjoy the adventure.
Well, and what we can close on that, Joni. I can't do any better. So thank you so much again. If you have any more questions about this or want to talk to Joni directly, maybe need that little shove, call Joni. All of her contact information is below. We have a Calendly link that's just for the second act audience. So please use that if you're so inclined to do so, and pick up her book sitting right behind me. It's a great way to do some of that work you may need to do on yourself. So Joni, thank you again. I always appreciate your time, and I look forward to our next conversation on Second Act TV.